Okay, so this morning we're speaking with Carrie Kearns, and she's a companion animal bereavement counsellor. So, Carrie, tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and how you got started in doing what you do.
Okay, hi. Well, first of all, thank you very much for speaking with me this morning. I'm a companion animal bereavement counsellor or pet bereavement counsellor, and I qualified it way back in 2001, and I've done a few other courses along on this topic since.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I used to work in veterinary practice. I was a veterinary care assistant, and over the years, I just thought, obviously dealing with clients that had lost a pet or were facing losing a pet. And I'm one of those people that just wants to help people. I don't like seeing people upset, and I want to try and make everything okay and help people out. So um, I'd had like a couple of clients say to me, "Do you know, you're really comforting, you're really good, and it's nice talking to you and you're reassuring, and you made me feel a bit better about what was going on." So I decided to train and do it properly and see if there's anything else I could do to help people.
Mhm.
And so I did the diploma in companion animal bereavement counselling, and then a level 3 certificate, and an advanced diploma in bereavement counselling and thanatology, and a level 3 certificate in counselling and counselling skills. And yeah, I've just been trying to help clients ever since. So I used to help clients in practice, but also I decided to leave full-time work working in the vets and set up my own bereavement counselling service. And I also tutor a veterinary staff course on the subject as well. So yeah, so now this is what my full-time job. And yeah, I love doing it. I like helping.
Fantastic, fantastic. Definitely a varied, interesting way of like kind of getting into things. But yeah, no, really, really good. So, why do you think that pet bereavement is so overlooked and quite a lot of the time unheard of?
I think pet bereavement and pet loss in general falls under the term of disenfranchised grief, which is
Okay.
a loss that isn't socially accepted. And I feel that when it comes to the loss of an animal, a companion animal, or an animal you work with, or
Mhm.
an animal that you know, I think that a lot of people don't realise the depth of the bond that people have with their animals. And I don't think they realise how hard it hits people when they lose said animal. And there are still a few people out there that just see pets as just an animal, and people actually say, oh, it's just a cat, or it's just a dog, or it's just a fish. And that's really hard to hear, because to that person that lost them, they were so much more than that. And a lot of people can't equate animals with family. They don't see losing a pet as being equivalent to, or even in some cases, more painful than losing a human family member. And so when people are upset about losing a pet, they're met with judgment and refusal to even accept that this may be a big deal to that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, when I meet new people and say, oh, what do you do? I say, I'm a pet bereavement counsellor. And they'll say, oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
And other people will be like, oh, really? Like, what's the point in that sort of thing? And that is why I do what I do, because of people that just don't get it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for the pet owners, they get it more than anyone. And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, for sure. And there's that raising that awareness there as well. So yeah, no,
Yeah, of
fantastic.
course.
For me, it's a really important thing because actually at some point we're all going to go through some kind of loss, some kind of bereavement with our pets.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, okay. So talk us through what's involved and what takes place.
Okay, so the way I do it may be different to how other bereavement counsellors do it, but what I do is initially send it like a consent form, because it's a contract between myself and my client, and I'll ask questions like, how long have you had your pet? What was the reason for the loss? What feelings are you struggling with the most? And I send this out like 24, 48 hours before an appointment, so that it just means that I get a bit of backstory as to why that person needs this appointment. And so it means that we can dedicate more time during the slot to actually helping them with the reason why they came to me in the first place.
Yeah.
And during the appointment, whether it's face to face, over Zoom, over the phone, it's basically just giving that person the opportunity to talk, and to talk to somebody that understands what they're going through, and will listen without judgment. No matter the circumstance, no matter the reason for the loss, I will listen without judgment, and I will hold space for that person and allow them to say the things that they may not feel comfortable saying to other people for fear of judgment or lack of understanding.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, all they really want is the opportunity to say what's on their mind without someone interrupting them or rushing them or trying to stop them crying because they're uncomfortable with that person's outward expression of their grief.
Mhm.
And I will try and offer reassurance and offer different perspectives on what happened, because sometimes when you're in the midst of your grief, it's hard to see every angle. And so I can listen to this person and say, okay, I hear what you're saying, I sort of see it from this angle. How do you feel about that approach or this angle? And a lot of the time people say, do you know, I never thought of it that way. That makes more sense. And that is actually quite helpful because I was looking at it from, this angle, and the way you've looked at it has shown me that maybe, it gives that person reassurance that, how they're feeling is natural and is normal, but that, sometimes the way we feel, we beat ourselves up about things beyond our control. And so during a session, sometimes I'm able to give people a different viewpoint, and so they see it from a different way, and realize that they the feelings that they have weren't as, that their input and their actions weren't as, um, you know, didn't contribute as much as they thought they might have done, which is something that a lot of people struggle with. They wonder whether they contributed to their pet's passing. And so by giving like an outsider's view, it helps that person to see things a bit clearer and see other ways forward.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah. So to kind of summarize a little bit, is that kind of giving the owner perspective on what's actually happening, and how kind of
Yeah,
leading them on a journey to recovery, I suppose.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's
yeah,
a different perspective, but also, as I said, holding space for that person,
yeah.
because I think when we're talking to people close to us,
Mhm.
they obviously don't want to see us upset, and they
Yeah,
don't, when we're talking about something that is visibly upsetting to us, a lot of people will try to stop us talking about that topic.
yeah.
Whereas with myself, I give that person the opportunity to say everything they need to say,
Mhm.
because sometimes just saying it out loud, the words, then it loses some of its power once it's said out
Yeah,
loud. And by offering different perspectives and reassurance, it helps to untangle the thoughts a little bit, and we sort of pick apart what that person's going through. And I suppose it really is sort of untangling the grief, really, and helping that person see a way forward where in the midst of it they can't see any way that they're going to feel any better than they do.
yeah, sure. Fantastic. Okay, good stuff. So what experience have you had before you were a pet bereavement counsellor?
So the main reason I got into pet bereavement counselling was because obviously I wanted to help people and help
Mhm.
clients during my work. And I first started working in veterinary practice when I was 18. I'd just left sixth form, and I was working for a vet, and it was just myself and the vet. And I saw my very first euthanasia at 18. I hadn't had pets myself, so I'd never gone through this personally. And I still remember it all these years later. I can still picture the dog. I'm like talking about it, I'm like right there back in the consulting room.
Right.
And it was really hard hitting, and I'd never seen a euthanasia before.
Mhm.
And although the actual euthanasia itself went very smoothly,
Mm.
the patient went past very peacefully and with dignity and
Mhm.
respect. It, as an 18-year-old who'd never witnessed this before, I was absolutely devastated. And to be quite honest, I was hysterical. I just started sobbing. I ran into the dispensary and sat on the kick stool sobbing. And the owner turned to the vet and said, "Is she all right?" And he said, "Oh, it's the first one, you know." And she said, "Oh, it never gets better, easier, does it?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, if I feel this bad and it isn't even my pet, how on
Yeah.
earth do the owners feel?"
Yeah.
And so I decided that I couldn't stand the thought of people feeling so upset and not have anyone to turn to.
Yeah.
And so I decided to train, because I thought I want to be the like one, at least one person that helps and gets it. And over the years of working in veterinary practice, I found that the way we dealt with pet bereavement wasn't quite to the standard I would have hoped we would have had it.
Mhm.
And I'm glad to say that over the years it has improved drastically. But at the time, over the years, it was basically just handing out the number to the Blue Cross and sort of leaving the owners to it, or saying, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," and then that was it. We left the owners to just get on with their lives, and it didn't sit well with me. I thought there must be more we can do.
Mhm.
And as veterinary staff, if we don't get it, how can we expect that person's friends and family to get it? You know, we are in a position to really help this person before they leave the practice and after. So I think it's important that we do our best to do that. So yeah, that's like main reasons why I sort of got into it, and those seeing those euthanasias and seeing people so upset, I wanted to be able to help, not cause more distress.
Yeah, and I suppose because you're there and you're in that environment, that when you are there, you're able to offer that advice kind of
Mm,
straight away rather than
yeah.
signposting elsewhere. So you're actually,
Mm,
yeah, I mean that's a really impactful story there. And I wasn't aware of that despite speaking to you previously. But yeah,
yeah.
it's a really that and that comes from the heart, doesn't it? That
Mm,
you've experienced it, and now you want to be helping others
yeah.
that are going through that as well. No,
Mm,
that great stuff. Okay, so what goes on in the mind of is bereft pet
yeah,
owner?
bereaved owner or grieving. There's so many things that go through.
Yeah.
And I must admit that there is like sort of a universal experience, although the actual intensity and the circumstances are always as individual as the person experiencing them.
Yeah.
But I would think that from my experience, the main things that go through a person's mind is just the overwhelm of what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And a lot of clients fear that they're going through like a mental health episode. They really wonder whether they're losing things. They
Mhm.
find that they are concerned about the intensity of their feelings and wonder whether these feelings are right, whether there's something wrong, whether they need extra support. And there are so many things that go through someone's mind. It's the what ifs and if onlys. You start to go over what happened. Could you
Mhm.
have done anything differently? The intensity of your feelings. One minute you're happy and you're smiling and you're talking okay. Next minute you're sobbing in the aisle in Morrison's or wherever, and you're wondering whether this will ever get easier and whether this is normal. And I think that's the main thing that I come across is people ask me, is this normal? Am I okay? Is this what happens?
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, this could be their first experience of pet loss. And
Mhm.
so they may have lost human family members, but it's the intensity of the emotions that are felt that this person wonders whether they're actually, spiraling to something deeper.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's scary. It's scary. The feelings can feel very overwhelming. And I think it helps to have someone say what you're going through is completely natural, completely
Yeah.
normal, and there is help for you, there is support for you, and you don't have to do this alone.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so kind of on that same theme. So what are the common cases that you deal with? So kind of what do owners come to you with?
Yeah, so mainly, I would say that the majority of my clients are those who have maybe had to make the decision for euthanasia of a companion,
Yeah.
and they're struggling with the after effects of that decision.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will struggle with being the one that had to consent to the ending of their pet's life, which is a
Mhm.
very big deal. And I think a lot of people don't realize the mental toll that that takes on someone, as to being the one that has to say, enough is enough, this is what we have to do. And so it's mainly people that have had to make the decision and they're struggling with being the one that had to do that, but also those who are struggling with the permanent loss of their companion and the physical loss of their loved one and the surrounding that loss as well. There are obviously many different reasons why someone
Mm.
may lose a companion, and that will impact the grief and the bereavement and how that person processes it. So yeah, it's mainly those that have had to make the decision, but also we're struggling with thoughts of what if or if only, and I suppose it's the lack of control over the situation, whether they didn't really have time to say goodbye, or they didn't have time to come to terms with losing their companion.
Mhm.
And so they're struggling with not only losing their companion, but the way it happened and the
Yeah.
speed of which things happened as well.
Yeah. And that kind of leads nicely onto the next thing. I'm not sure nicely is the right word, but in terms of what other than old age, so other than when
Mm,
when we do get to the end of our pets' lives, what are the
yeah.
reasons might people experience that loss?
Yeah. So, I mean, loss isn't always to do with death either. It could be that the pet's had to be rehomed.
Mm.
It could be that the pet has gone missing. And these are both situations where, the person will feel grief and be bereaved because they've
Mm.
lost their companion. And also it's the circumstances around losing their pet. So obviously rehoming, or they go missing, or
Mm.
when it comes to like the euthanasia itself, it could be that the pet was horrifically injured in an accident. Maybe the owner accidentally injured their pet, and so euthanasia was the only option.
Mhm.
Maybe that the pet was attacked by another animal, and so they've had to consent to euthanasia. It
Mhm.
may be that the pet was born with like a congenital issue,
Mhm.
and so the quality of life is, very poor, and so a decision has to be made.
Mm.
So you've also got like the loss of younger animals as well.
Mm.
I think when animals are older, we tend to expect it, and although it's still hard to lose them, we sort of come to terms with it. But losing a younger companion, obviously it can be harder hitting because you feel robbed of the time you could have had. There's also like behavioural euthanasia as well, which I personally feel that mental suffering is just as valid a reason for
Yeah.
euthanasia as physical suffering. And there are lots of pets out there that may require euthanasia due to behavioural issues, which is hard for the owners, it's hard for the animal living through that. And so that's another reason why people may come to me, and why why they may lose their companion. So yeah, and so all of these reasons can influence how a person reacts and responds to the loss of their companion from their lives. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's it's really interesting because when we talk about loss and bereavement, we assume
Mm.
it's end of life. We don't
Yeah.
necessarily assume that it's about rehoming and the other reasons that are around. And that's something that I really
Mm.
kind of wanted you to focus on there, just to kind of give
Mm.
some perspective.
Yeah.
So, Carrie, what are the stages of grief? Are there particular stages within grief?
So people talk about stages of grief, and this is something that is quite divisive, I think, in like the counselling profession. Is that a lot of people will have heard of like the 5 stages of grief, which were sort of written by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who had spoken to people that were terminally ill, and she was talking to them about how they felt about their own mortality, and how they felt knowing that they were going to die soon.
Mhm.
And she came up with like the 5 stages of grief that people sort of go through, but it wasn't ever meant to be this is a set day, these are set stages, and that it's linear, you go through each stage in order and then that's it, you're done. It's Grief sort of doesn't work that way, but the 5 stages were like in no particular order, but anger, bargaining, depression, let's see, acceptance. Let me see. I always forget these 5 stages: anger, bargaining, depression. Let me see. Do you know? I wrote them down because I knew I would forget them. It's
It's
just
okay.
bear
You
with-
don't you don't need to like go into each step that there is. You can just kind of say what, like, if there are stages, and it's really just to address if there are different, if they're different emotions that people are going to go through.
yeah. Yeah, well, we've got denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So these were like the main 5 that Dr. Kubler-Ross had sort of had written down, sort of thing. But this is what most people sort of think you're supposed to go through, and
Mhm.
that but then when you say there are 5 stages of grief, people tend to take that quite literally and
Yeah.
think, I'm grieving wrong because I'm not at that stage, and I should be at XYZ stage,
Mhm.
and I'm at this stage, and they feel like they're grieving wrong, like they're doing it all wrong. And there is no right or wrong way to grieve. You grieve however you feel. It's as individual as the person experiencing it. And whilst you may experience these so-called stages, it really isn't a case of, right, I'm going to start with denial, then I'm going to move into anger, then I'm going to move into bargaining. It doesn't work that way, and it isn't fair on anyone to say this is how it is, and if you're not doing it this way, then you're not doing it correctly. It was just easier to try and condense it in a way, but the fact is that each of these so-called stages sort of branches out into other parts, and so like grief in general, it's a lot. It's quite messy. Grief is very messy, and I used to call it like a cycle, because we could tend to go through certain emotions, and then we may be stuck in a certain emotion, or we'll come back to another one, and so I sort of see it as more of like a cycle in a way, but it's also quite tangled. So there is no, like I said, it isn't linear at all.
Yeah, and that's I feel like that's really important for owners to know as well, because when we talk about the stages of grief, but rightly so, you've come back with there's 5 steps that this is kind of, if people start googling, that is what they're going to find. And
Yeah.
actually the reality is that it's not linear. It's very individual, and I really like what you've described there as it being a cycle. So it's a cycle of, you might get stuck at this point, and then you're going to go back, and then you're going to go forwards, and then you might move on, but you might just stay there for a little while before you then go back around. You might go the opposite way around and then come back. But yeah, really really well described there. That's really nice. So stages of grief or non-stages of grief, what would be the most comforting bit of advice that you could give a pet owner?
Well, I suppose, like, again, this is very very individual, and like and when I'm counselling a client, I tailor my words and advice and support to suit that individual. But I suppose the most comforting thing you could say to someone is that you understand where they're coming from. I would never say, like, I know how you feel, because we don't. And it really sort of bugs me when people say, I know how you feel, because we don't, because we're not that person. But what I would say to somebody is that, I understand. And I think that's the most comforting thing, is that I understand, and I appreciate that this is very difficult for you, and I'm here. I'm here for you as long as you need me to be, and that your pet was very lucky to have had you in their life. And no matter how you may be feeling at this moment, I think you can, at some point, you will realize that you made such a difference to that pet's life, and that they had the best life possible because you cared, and because you were their advocate, and because you looked out for them every step of the way. And even if you had to make a decision to say goodbye to them, it was a selfless decision, and it was made with their best interests at heart. And that is something that I'm sure you've always done throughout the ownership of this companion. You've always put their needs above your own. And I understand that this is very difficult, and that I'm always here to listen. And I think that is maybe something that people may appreciate, is just knowing that someone's there to listen without rushing, without judgment.
Yeah, and that's important. So you've got that understanding, haven't you? You've got that understanding, you've got that connection, that non-judgmental. You've an ear to listen, and to support as well. Cool. Okay, so a little bit off the scale here. So what are your thoughts on afterlife, animals and the afterlife?
So again, this is like a very personal and individual thing, and I personally, I'm a great believer in an afterlife, and I do believe that we do meet up with our companions again afterwards. In fact, what I'll say to my clients is that I wouldn't dream of putting my own religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs onto somebody. But what I would say is, whatever you believe happens to our companion happens, because we can't say it does or it doesn't. Whatever brings you comfort whilst you're still here and they're not is important. Whatever brings you comfort. And if thinking that they are waiting for us somewhere, if the the rainbow bridge ideal or the summerland ideal or heaven or what have you. Whatever brings you comfort whilst you're trying to live your life without them by your side is important. And I mean, there are a few like animal communicators out there and animal mediums who said that they're able to speak to animals that have passed on. And I know there'll be some people out there rolling their eyes and thinking, oh, that's ridiculous, that's not true. But for the people that have experienced it, it's true enough for them. And so that's all that matters to me. I'm not here to say this is what happens, this is, because if somebody had a very different viewpoint, what brings me comfort may not bring that person comfort. So I think whatever you believe is what is how it is. But I personally, I would like to think that we meet up again. There's a few animals that I've lost over the years that I would love to see again, but and obviously a couple of people, mainly animals. So again, it's a very individual thing. And I don't think there's any right or wrong way to think about it, but I think it would be wrong to impose your sort of beliefs onto someone because you find that comforting. It's whatever that person believes is right, whatever you want.
Brilliant. Okay, so kind of like wrapping up a little bit now. So what advice would you give to someone who's really struggling to move on? Like just a really little a golden nugget that you could give to somebody to help them.
I suppose that the main thing is to sit with your feelings and really feel them, because one thing that I say to clients a lot is that there's no easy way through this, and grief isn't something that you get over, it's something that you work through, and the pain does lessen. It never leaves us completely because we've lost a part of ourselves essentially, and that hurts. We're brokenhearted, that hurts. So the pain does lessen to a dull ache that we learn to live with. And I think the important thing to sort of get across is that you won't always feel this badly. It may feel like it. It may feel like you'll never smile again, you'll never laugh again, but you will. But it'll take some time. And that isn't to say, a phrase that people could tend to come out with is time is a great healer. But what they fail to mention is it's not just the passing of time that heals, it's what you do in that time that helps you to heal. And so I would say sit with your feelings, and although they may feel overwhelming and intense, when we push them down, they need to be felt, they need to be heard, they need to be expressed. And the more we push our feelings down, the more they resurface with a vengeance. And I sort of call this like the pop bottle effect. It gets shaken up, and if you don't release the lid a little bit, it's just going to come out at some point. It's going to explode. And at least if we sit with our feelings, and if you feel like you need a good cry, go with it, just do it, because you'll feel so much better once you've done so. And it's important that you recognize that whatever you're experiencing, even if it's different to other people who've suffered the same loss, it is right for you. And to sit with the feelings, acknowledge them, and just allow them to be felt and pass, because once you've experienced them, they can then they lessen, the hold on they have on you lessens a bit. So just bear in mind that you won't always feel this bad, but it is important to feel what you're feeling and talk to people about how you're feeling. And a lot of people don't know what to say to you or how to help you, so tell them what you need and what is helpful for you and what isn't. Be quite firm with your boundaries and say to people, look, I really need space right now, or I need this, I need that. Be clear with what you need, and make boundaries and stick to them, and just know that there are people out there that really do care and really understand what you're going through and want to listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, and then lastly, Carrie, how can people get in contact with you?
Okay, so I'm on Facebook, and I have a website, www.animalbereavementcounselling.com. So you can find me on Google or on Facebook.
Brilliant. Okie dokes. Well, thank you very much, Carrie. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you very much.
Take care and bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks very much.